one of the strengths that could also be a weakness is the learning. So it's like you want to learn. So I started all of these, they've overlapped, it's overlapped. So then haven't really, some of them haven't finished and have it on my list to do. And then I'm like, oh, let me go this way. And it's exactly that. And you get too much inflow, not enough outflow, and like energy, it gets stuck. And then it's just like, what do I do with this just jumble of information? And I even made a note to myself one day that was like, stop consuming and just start like processing through, start actually doing the work and letting it flow out.
Welcome back, friends, to the Discovering Your Calling podcast. This is your host, Sherry Miter, and I am joined today by one of my Discovering Your Calling alumni from our academy. Actually, Christina was part of our first group experience of the course of the academy. It's really not a course, it's an academy. So I'm excited to dive in and hear what Christina's experience was from the Discovering Your Calling Academy. So welcome to the show, Christina.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm so glad to be able to share feedback, have conversation about it, because it was such an impactful experience.
I love to hear that. And I really do look forward to hearing how it impacted you. But before we dive into that, share a little bit with the listeners about who you are, what you're doing right now in your job, but what your passion is, what your calling is, and where you're headed.
Okay, so my name is Christina. I'm an accountant by trade. I've been in the accounting field since 2006, so going on 17 years now. Wow, that just seems like a really long time. But over life experiences the last few years, I really have felt a calling to share some of the trials and tribulations I've went through, how I've gotten through them, like experiences, and then how to get to the other side. So you ultimately are loving the life you live, that you can find joy in any journey that you're going through. And when you're on any kind of healing journey, more specifically for me, it is a journey. It's definitely a learning experience, and it can also be lonely. So it's like my passion is to come alongside women to let them know, one, they're not alone in their healing journey, and also to kind of guide them on the way whenever like there's points where you can get stuck. So kind of help them through that stuckness so they can maybe speed up the process and or even enjoy how much you can the process a little bit more.
Yeah. And I so love what you're doing. And I love that you're turning into struggles that you had into this beautiful thing for other women and to support them. So I feel very grateful to play a very small piece in that journey for you. And I'm glad we're going to continue to work together too. We were just talking about that, to really see this through completion too, to help women become all they can be, even despite having going through struggles and trauma and
yes,
like that.
It's one of those things is like, one of the things that I've always thought is everything happens for a reason. And even the bad things, we have to find a way to make good out of them. It's always a choice. And it's so easy. And I had somebody say this to me the other day and they don't even know all the details of the thing, my story. They just know very high level. And they're like, you had a choice and you chose to get to where you are. You didn't choose to stay stuck in it, which so many people choose to do. And I think it's because they feel like that's their only option. So I really want to make women aware you have a choice in how you choose to live, and you can choose a life of joy.
I love that. Yeah. I love that, because it is about the choices. And sometimes, like I said, people just don't even know that they have other options. So they need a voice like you out there to say, hey, listen to me. You have options here. I can show you the way, get you out of the forest. They're stuck in the forest. They don't see the way, and you can help clear that path for them. So let's talk about the Discovering Your Calling Academy. Like, what was it? Where were you? And what was it that made you decide to say yes to joining the Discovering Your Calling program, academy, group?
So I was in a point where I got very clear going through other programs, classes, just listening to personal development, business development, all the things. I knew who I wanted to serve, but I was still toying with the idea of the method and how I wanted to serve, whether it was coaching, writing a book, podcasting, doing a course, all of the above. And then within like the coaching realm, what area of coaching, because there's so many different facets that you can go into. And I was really getting stuck in the weeds of which direction do I go? Because it was like, I was being pulled in all the directions and had no focus. So I wasn't making progress in any of what I was doing. And the way you presented the academy is, one, we'll take a step back. So it's good that you know your mission, because that's part of it too, but we'll hone in on the skills and to kind of save you from trying all the things, where your strengths fall into any of the categories, so you can focus on that first, because you'd find that more enjoyable.
Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit about that with the strengths piece of it, because that's a huge piece of what we do. But it's interesting because I totally get that, being in the weeds with all of the different courses, because you and I, and we've been in, and that's how we met, was in another course, was in a podcasting course. And, there's a great value in learning things, but people like us who love to learn and love to do the courses, sometimes you can take way too many courses and you just it gets you stuck. It just gets you feeling like overwhelmed. Which is the priority? What should I be doing? So, and I think a lot of people get in that place. Those of us that are course junkies, especially. So.
Yes. One of the strengths that could also be a weakness is the learning. So it's like, you want to learn. So I started all of these, they've overlapped. So then some of them haven't finished and have it on my list to do. And then I'm like, oh, let me go this way. And it's exactly that. And you get too much inflow, not enough outflow, and like energy, it gets stuck. And then it's just like, what do I do with this just jumble of information? And I even made a note to myself one day that was like, stop consuming and just start like processing through, start actually doing the work and letting it flow out. Otherwise, you're going to stay stuck in the cycle.
Yeah, good advice. Good advice. So because you have done a lot of different courses and group programs, how did the Discovering Your Calling program look different than those other ones?
It was different in that each of the weeks that we met, it wasn't, a lot of courses are just pre-recorded videos. Occasionally you'll have the live calls, but the live calls are usually still like talking at you. There's not really engagement. Whereas in Discover Your Calling, the group setting is small and intimate enough that you have that dialogue. So you're not only teaching, but you're also getting feedback at the same time to make sure that what you're teaching is landing and that we fully understand and have a chance to like apply in a working environment what we're doing. And with that guidance as to, okay, you might want to adjust a little bit here. Have you thought about that? And it's not only the dynamic of like one-on-one, but you also have the dynamic of insights from other people, other people's strengths, other people's experiences and knowledge. And
yeah. And that's because again, having taken a lot of other courses, I never want my students, my clients to ever feel like they're one in a couple of hundred people there trying to say, hey, me over here, I need help,
right.
And, that I will always keep the group, maybe not as small as there were 5 in your group, it may be a little bigger, but it will never be more than probably 15, 20 max, because that's all I can handle. So it's always going to be that small, intimate group. Actually, let me ask you one question based on what you said earlier about like taking a lot of courses and never finishing them. Did you feel like you were able, I know it was a lot, like it's pretty intense. Like every week there's homework, there's stuff to do. So how did that pace feel for you? Was it, did you like the intensity of it? Did it make you finish it?
Yes. And it's funny because sometimes life happens, but those moments that life happen, we had that constant dialogue. So you had that sense of accountability as to, and you always tweaked the way, like you offered an incentive one time when it seemed like some of us were struggling to get our homework done. You offered an incentive to encourage us to get it done. So you didn't have that like, oh no, the teacher's going to get mad at me feeling, but you had this, oh, I want to make, like, not only for myself, but also to show up for somebody else too. That level of accountability was great. And the only time that I struggled, it was all self-inflicted. I put too much on my plate or I got stuck in my head, but then there was always that sense of accountability to make sure I came back and met the expectation, not only I set for myself, but also that I would get the most out of it interacting with you.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's another advantage, right, of a smaller group. If you're
Mm-hmm.
missing of a group of 5, you are
Yep.
missed.
Yes.
If you're missing of a group of 100, 200, 500, nobody even knows
Right.
that you dropped off.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. What was your favorite part of the program?
My favorite part, I think, would be the interaction. At first I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it just because I've never experienced it before. And overall, like I'm very reserved at first. I would say I'm like shy in a new environment. So I don't often engage unless it's like pulled out of me, like until you get to know people and then you can't get me to stop talking. So I wasn't sure how I was going to like the group dynamic of people I didn't know, but it was a great group of women and we were all like not on the same path, but going through similar experiences that we all could relate to each other. It was always very uplifting and encouraging. So I think it's just like the interaction of the group, the people that we're all learning and growing together in a safe place.
Yeah, it was you guys were a great group of women supporting each other. It was fun for me to watch that happen too. And I still see it happening. I still see the connections on Facebook.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was such a safe place too. Like that just occurred to me as I said it, is to not all places are safe where you can feel like you can openly share and be vulnerable with where you're at and worry about being judged or criticized or like snarky remarks. It was a very safe environment, I felt like.
Yeah. Good. Good. What surprised you out of the program? That what did you get out of it that you didn't expect maybe?
To reframe my weaknesses as strengths.
Talk a little bit about that, Christina.
So things that I have been almost criticized, I don't know if that's the right word for, but things people would point out about me, they would always frame as weaknesses. Even to the point when I was in my most recent position, as my boss would be like, you're doing a really great job, and the but would fall into one of the categories of my strengths. And I'm like, but that's a strength. And learned that sometimes your strengths can be almost so powerful you get distracted by them and kind of lose focus on what the task at hand is. So the strengths offered a good insight as to, you know what, this has always been said a weakness for me. I'm going to harness that, bring it back, and really make use of it so it becomes like a superpower as opposed to kind of holding me back a little bit.
And was this your first experience with the Clifton Strengths?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. What would talk a little bit more about that, because I think for a lot of people that is something new that maybe they've never heard of before. And besides the fact that you realize like, oh, what I thought were weaknesses are actually my strengths. What else was beneficial to finding and learning about your natural talents and strengths?
So a lot of it too, when you're reading through, especially the top 5 and there's a more personalized section on it, right? That goes through as to these are kind of high level, and then this is really specific to you, and reading through and being like, oh, that's why I do what I do. For example, with like connectedness, I will see very much all the pieces and have to put them together. And I almost wondered why, like, I could see things that other people didn't. Sometimes people would say, that's kind of too out there. And then after we circled the mountain a few times, we came back and like it ended up being the answer. So I'm like, okay, well, you guys had to do your own processing thing. So various things would pop up. And as I'm reading this, I'm like, oh, that's why I do this. Oh, that's why I do this. Another one would be the learning, where I want to know more about everything. There's times that I feel like I'm having conversation with people and I'm like, oh, but why? Oh, tell me more. And I'm like, people would always call me nosy. And I'm like, well, I'm not nosy. I just want to know everything about everything about everything. So I can put all those pieces together and make sense of the world around me.
Yeah. And did you find knowing your strengths kind of did help you then go back to where you were saying earlier about that you felt so overwhelmed on like, what should I do? Should I do the podcast? Should I do this? Should I do that?
Mm-hmm.
Did it help once you kind of knew your natural way of being and doing things and thinking, feeling, behaving? Did it help you kind of sort through the weeds there as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially saying there was a moment in time when during the course where there were little things that were irritating me about my current position. And I wasn't going to leave because I was working on building my side hustle. Right. And I could deal with it. But then one day my phone rang and a recruiter called me and he was like, hey, what's going on? So I'm like, well, I'm working here, but he's like, are you open? I'm like, well, because my boss really just upset me. Yeah, I'm open to hearing what there was. Long story short, I ended up being offered the position. And then I'm like, I was going to take it because it was a better opportunity. It was going to get me out of this situation that I was in with my boss. And I was hoping the end result, I could focus more on my side hustle because my boss wouldn't be so energy draining. Well, then my current position, this is the first time ever, counter offered me, but it wasn't just my boss. It was the CFO and the owner of the company that were really fighting for me to stay. So I came to class one day. It's like, I don't know what to do with this. Actually, I think it was before I got the job offer that I came back to do, but you walked me through as to how your strengths play in each of the roles. Like, consider that before you make any move, because you don't want to just keep repeating the same cycle over and over and over again, and essentially stay stuck. So then when my current company was going through and counter offering me, that's what I did one weekend after like a week full of meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, them trying to resolve the issues. I said, give me the weekend to think about it. And I literally pulled out my strengths and visualized both positions and what I was responsible for in my current position and what they were getting ready to change the position into a little bit to tweak what I wanted versus what I was walking into. It was hands down, I was going to have the opportunity to utilize my strength in my current role. So I never took the new opportunity. But in that was also a distraction because then I felt like I needed to put more into my job and kind of lost sight of my passion project. So now I'm circling back. I saw that, called you, like we reconnected, so we can continue on. So now I can reincorporate my passion project again.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you shared that story, because that was, I think, a pivotal moment for you to realize, wait, you are in control. Your strengths can guide you the right path. And even though I know you're not going, as fast as you would like to create your passion project, but this job is providing for you. And the whole group, we did sense after that happened that you were happier at your job. And you were able to figure that out. So that was just great to just see in itself, that clarity. You and one of the other students kind of had the same, and I don't even know if she's going to create another thing. She just was able, based on the whole experience and the strengths and clarity, to have the hard conversation with her manager and be happier where she was. So.
Yep. And that's what I think that's allowed me to do too, is like, look, you're criticizing my strengths, let's work to make it better. And then these are also other things that I'm more interested in, or strengths aligned. So I'd rather be doing these pieces. They haven't fully implemented that yet. But yeah, since just my boss's attitude towards me has shifted, I'm much happier there. In the boundaries that I lost were self-inflicted. It wasn't anything they did. It's like my workaholic came back out and was focused on the wrong work, if you will. And then it was funny too, because I was talking to my daughter about that decision. And she's like, Mom, you need to stay. She goes, other than this one little issue, I've never seen you happier at another place. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. Because other than that one little issue, the dynamic of the office environment is really great. So like, if I can stay there while I continue to build this thing on the side, great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's such a great way to be. I don't know if you listened to the podcast from this week that we just launched. That's what my client there is. She's a single mom, same situation you. She couldn't just step away from one thing into another. And, sometimes that's what we do, but let's get happy. Let's have the tough conversations like you did with your boss to say, hey, this is what I need. This is what I bring to you, but this is what I need back. And based on your strengths. And
I think what helped with that too is not necessarily my boss. My boss talked to me more about these things after the fact. But the CFO, when she was having a conversation, she's like, I feel like you're meant to be here. Like, she's a person of faith. And we had an open dialogue about that. She's like, you're meant to be here. You have a purpose here. Like, she's obviously not telling me I can't leave, but essentially you can't leave. She goes, and the way she spoke into me, it wasn't because of the work I actually produced, but she saw me for me. She saw those strengths in me. She saw, like, I get hyper focused. I can't remember which one it is, but like, I think it's responsibility. And then like, I get to the root cause. I'm all about getting down to that root cause of what's going on, where everybody else just wants to put Band-Aids on. And she's like, I like that about you. And that like you stand up for it and you fight for it. And I'm like, I never saw that. So thank you for speaking to my integrity and who I am. That's what's going to draw me more than just what work I can produce.
Yeah, good for her that, and what a great affirmation for you to hear that, to finally hear like, yeah, she sees my strengths for my strengths. Yeah. Oh, anything else that you felt like you really got out of being a part of the Discovering Your Calling Academy?
It really also, whenever you're going through any kind of process, mindset is always a huge component. And I like the way you incorporated mindset throughout. So not only you have one dedicated week, but you saw whenever any of us were slipping a little bit with mindset stuff, you'd kind of reel it back and address that mindset issue from whatever direction we needed it from. So our minds, though, know how wonderful they are for all the functionality they give us, they also get in our way a lot. And there's a reason why they do. But to be able to witness that and say, okay, we're not listening to that part of you right now. Let's move on. Whatever tools that you use in your toolbox, take out and utilize. But always bringing mindset back to awareness that's one of the first places to look when you're starting to get stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. Mindset's huge. Mindset is huge. So speaking of mindset, what mindset almost kept you from possibly joining the program?
Probably my biggest would be like fear. Fear always gets in my way. There's always various levels of fear, but probably the fear of not putting the work in, not showing up for myself, and not because I have a repetitive of start, not finish, start, not finish, start, not finish. I almost had this fear as to am I going to do this to myself again? And we had very open, candid conversations. Like, I really like the way you conversated with me throughout it. There's a lot of people who have their courses, whether it's them personally or their team of people, who start to push too much or start to almost twist words in a manipulative way. And you're like, you need to do what's best for you. Here's the facts. Let me know if you, and we had I would bring a concern, you would address the concern but in a non-manipulative way, in a very straightforward, here's the facts, do with it what you want.
Mm-hmm. Like when we were having the sales conversation per se.
Yeah, definitely not salesy.
Yeah. And that's the thing, because having been, like we discussed earlier, one of those people that has, and again, you and I were in a course that I don't think either one of us finished, and we weren't happy. And I don't know about you, but I'm still paying for it. And it's like, so that's where we met. So I know that there are people out there like you and I, we're not the only ones, that invest in courses and never complete them. Or
the statistics are super high on it. I can't remember what they are, but I know I've heard them before from people who are selling courses on, this is why I have it set up this way, because the percentage of this style course, the percentage of like all the various styles, and they gave the percentages of completion.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm sure it's probably even higher now, because that was probably over a year ago.
Right. Yeah. I feel like I have seen that. Is it like 80% or something? Like it is a high.
At least.
Yeah, it is a very high.
Especially ones that don't have any live component.
Right. And that is one of the things that I'm very passionate about, is I do not want the Discovering Your Calling Academy to fall into that 80%. I want it to be something that, I mean, obviously, yes, sometimes there are just life circumstances that we have to put it on pause. But hey, that happens to a student. They can come back in when they're ready. I want them to finish this and feel good about it. And what you do with it's up to you. But I don't want it to be one of those things that just like, oh yeah, I think I paid for that course. I don't even know how to log into it anymore.
How many email buckets I have? Thank goodness for subfolders. Subfolders I have.
Yeah. Any advice for anybody that is sitting there thinking, and maybe they are like you and I, maybe they are a course junkie themselves, and they're listening and they're thinking, oh yes, that's so me. And they're thinking, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to invest in one more course, one more thing that I may or may not even finish? Or they're worried about the investment. They're worried about the time. Like they're just thinking, I don't know if this is right for me. What would you say to that person that's just thinking about it?
So I would say, and this is coming from one being on that side of, I'm not sure what I want to invest in, and having several investments in stuff that I've still haven't even logged into, versus ones that I've gotten most of the way through. This is definitely just the Discover Your Calling Academy is not your typical course. I've never experienced one that was set up quite the way this one was. And Sherry, you are so personable, and you can tell just by your demeanor and how you interact, and you truly care about your students. It's not just, let's get it done. You truly are invested and spend the time that's needed to get us to where we feel like we need to be. Definitely the best, one of the best investments, probably the best, because it's the only one I finished. I think that's really truly the only course I've finished, and the ones I've bought in a few years. And I still, to this, every time I have a decision to make, whether it's along the lines of my passion project, my professional course career, my accounting by day career, or anywhere in between. It's like, what would Sherry say? Let's look at your strengths. Where are your strengths at versus what decision you're trying to make? How does it align? And depending on the level of depthness that I need to go, I'll go very high level of what I remember off the top of my head. If it's more a more serious decision, I'll pull back out that report in the little handouts with some of the summaries and go through and say, okay, how would this decision align with my strengths right now? And I've been trying to make this decision on this one particular thing, and I'm going back through it and I'm like, would my strengths play a role? They would, but so it's not a complete yes for me yet, but I don't know that it's not going to be. But still, every time it pops up in my head, I'm like, okay, so where does this fall in line with your strengths? How would this and your strengths like mesh together?
I love that. I love that you it's the tools, because it's not me. It's not the program. It was the tools that you invested in. You took the time, you did the work, and they will now guide you. As I always say, your strengths are like that navigate. It's your compass rose, right? Mm-hmm. They never lead you astray. So go back to them. So I'm so glad that you have imprinted that on your heart and in your mind that, okay, my compass rose, my thing is, Yep. And if it takes hearing my voice to make you do it, okay. All I'm thinking when you said this, my kids would probably be like, oh, what would my mom tell me to do? So as long as you're saying it with love in your heart.
Oh, yes, definitely. It's very much as to, it's like you said, you were the vehicle for the tool. So yes, you definitely had a hand in the whole process, but one, giving me access to the tools, making me even aware that they were there, and then also walking through them to say, how do these fit? And then there was also times as to like what our dream life would be like and how our strengths fall into that dream life. So it's not even just like your career, but how your career or shifting careers would fit into your strengths, what you envision your life to be. Because if it checks all the boxes for the strengths, but you would be miserable in your life, what good is it really going to do for you? Whereas you kind of want to have those side by side working together so you can love the life you're living while utilizing your strengths and still maintaining that level of energy. Because if you're working outside of your strengths, I know I learned this from why my energy was so drained a lot of times at the end of the night, because I was working outside of my strengths. I was working at stuff that was in the bottom of the list, as opposed to the top of the list. So I kind of had to switch the way I can do the same task, but I had to switch the way I was looking at the task so I would have more energy. Or some days if the task needs to get done, it needs to get done. And I just know I'm going to be burnt for the night.
Yeah. Perfect summary, Christina, of the Discovering Your Calling program, or at least a couple of the main core pieces there of, the strengths, the you part and the visioneering part. And speaking of visioneering, what is next for you? Like, where are you headed next?
So I currently have a podcast that I need to get actively recording again. And thank you for reaching out to me, because it's been on the back of my mind. Like, I really need to do this again. Why are you not recording? Why are you not recording? And then this invitation came and it's like, here's your sign. It's time to get back out to it. So it's like stirring something back in. I was just invited to go along with this program where I'm going to be contributing to a book. So more details to come on that when I have more details, but I'm going to write at least a snippet of my story to be published in a book. And then I'm working on creating / launching. I'm not sure what it's going to look like yet, but I really feel called to start a mentorship program. That will eventually turn into a mentorship / coaching program, depending on where people are at. And then creating a community of like-minded women who want to experience joy in their life, that can relate to one another in a safe, judgment-free zone. Because some of the experiences I went through, depending on where you're at, there's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of shame. So you can't really openly share without innocent meaning questions, but that are very hurtful. Is to like, one of the ones would be like, why'd you stay so long? Well, it's a very complicated question, and I feel like I need to defend myself to you. So depending on where people are coming from, even so, those can be hurtful. So like a safe place that women can have that open dialogue. So I'm working on creating that. Not sure when it'll be out, but that's what's on my heart to do.
Yeah. And the women that you mostly work with, based on your own experience, have been through like domestic violence. Speak a little bit about that, just so anybody listening might recognize, like, ooh, that's for me, or ooh, I need to send somebody your way,
Yeah, absolutely.
Identify who that would be for.
So the women I'm serving are women who have been in a toxic relationship, whether they're still in the relationship and kind of need support in what the best decision is, what's going on, if they've newly left, or even if they left a while ago and are still working through the healing process, but left a toxic relationship. So I was married to a man who was a drug addict and had narcissistic tendencies. He was very manipulative. He was verbally abusive, borderline physical. He never actually touched me, but got very close too many times. So yeah, because of my faith at the time, I always preached that I had a relationship, not a religion, but I was more acting like I had a religion, not a relationship. So I felt like my faith was keeping me stuck. And then I had a very clear awakening from revelation from God that he was essentially releasing me to leave. And a lot of the things I was hearing that was keeping me stuck didn't really fit for the situation I was in. It was for different circumstances. So essentially anybody who feels like they have to stay in a toxic relationship, guiding them along the process, not convincing them to leave, because everybody needs to make their own decision. And if I was in a position that it would have worked out, I would have stayed, but it didn't work that way for me. So just opening the opportunity for women to see what all their options are. And then when you get to the other side, that there is hope, that you can love your life. You can find who you are to your core. Because when you're in a toxic relationship, you lose essentially your sense of identity. You have to kind of become the shell of a person to conform to what their expectations are to keep the peace. So if you want peace, you as yourself doesn't exist. So just rediscovering who you are and loving your life.
And I think that's two things I just have to say with that is, one, because of your story and who I know you are going to serve and you are serving already, that's why I'm so passionate about you doing this thing, because I know there's a not just your calling, but there's a calling for that. Like, people need you to step into that calling. There's a lot of women desperate for that. They just don't know, they don't know where to turn yet. So with that,
I know I was one of them.
Yeah. But it's also such a blessing to see how and why you discovering your true talents and strengths and all the things you're good at. Because we talk more about, it's not just the strengths, that's a huge piece of it, but there's more that we do in the academy on the you part, to see you find yourself again, and the good parts of you that you did lose because of that season of your life. So to play a part in that was so special and is special. So, and what is the name of your podcast, Christina?
Loving Your Life Again.
Loving your life again. So Have you checked the name?
I didn't stumble over it this time. I was going to name it something. It was funny. I was going to name it something else, and I stumbled over it.
Uh-huh.
And then I think my mind was so stuck on it that's where I felt like that's what I felt like it was. And I keep getting like words, but yeah, the Loving Your Life Again podcast.
Yeah, and check it out. Christina's got some great episodes on there, and very helpful. So listen to her podcast. She's gonna have new stuff coming out soon. Put the pressure on you, and follow that journey. If you want to connect with Christina, where's the best place for them to find you, Christina?
I am on both Facebook and Instagram at Reload in Christ. My website is reloadinchrist.com. And there's a contact me button on the website. And if you subscribe as I start releasing new things, you'll be the first to know.
All right, great. And we will have those in the show notes as well. See, I'm stumbling over my words here. So, Christina, thank you so much for being an alumni, being a student, and showing up in the Discovering Your Calling Academy, for being here today, and for continuing, because you and I are going to continue the journey together. So I'm excited about that, to help you really launch this in the near future.
Well, thank you for everything.